Everyone, it's Frederick Vanberg. Just kind of thinking about different ideas to pursue over the next few months here, and I've been catching up on work related to folks at Harvard. So David Reich, Nick Patterson, and I would argue Pardis Sabeti. And so I've published with Pardis in the past, and I've met Nick, and I'm sure David was around, but I had a little bit more interaction with Nick. And, collectively they've done amazing work on kind of understanding our past using genomics. And so present-day DNA, but also ancient DNA from thousands of years ago, really. And understanding population movements and likely kind of admixture between different populations. And so, kind of just thinking out loud a little bit, but there are a lot of studies, I believe, that could be done that relate to kind of each individual area. And so I noticed that there's a pretty stunning lack of the context here locally. And what I mean by that is there's a number of different very interesting archaeological kind of formations that are up to 6,000 years old here in the southeast, along the coast of my state of Georgia, but also Florida, going up to kind of where the Mississippi goes north, and then on the other side, on the northeast side, up to South Carolina and North Carolina. And there's hundreds of these dotted along the coastline. And when I look at the ancient DNA maps, this part of the country is not really filled out, if that makes sense. And so there's an unfortunate instance here where the native populations were actually moved from this part of the country west, and so some of the context will have been lost, but there is going to be a lot of evidence in terms of the ancient DNA, and just trying to build that out. Now, this takes a long time, I understand, but there may be resources that could be accessible through present-day collections in museums, and if there's a as non-destructive as possible way to do that, I think that would be really useful to be able to fill out this particular part of the world. David Reich's lab has released, with the help of Paul Allen's foundation and the Jim Simons Foundation, in an open source way, quite extensive ancient DNA genotypes. And so they're combining what I believe to be the kind of modern day 1,000 or so, I think it's 1240, kind of populations with these ancient DNA populations. So it would be a really interesting project. And again, this takes time. There's a person, I forget her name right now, but she's working for David Reich right now as kind of a senior postdoc, senior associate. And she went to Emory. And so her PhD was within ancient DNA. And now she is like the head person that helps to build out kind of, not the logistics, but the collaborations across the world. And so my understanding now is that she's, again, I'm blanking her name right now, but she's working within different constituencies within Africa, Kenya, etc., I believe, and building out those relationships to be able to go further and further, likely back in time, to really understand this kind of expansion within Africa, and then the kind of out of Africa migration. But I think the these are like shell middens or shell circles, or they're called a variety of different names. And around the world, these have kind of quite different shapes. But here, they're circular, and there's kind of like almost like you would imagine, like kind of lighthouses along the sea here, right? So these circular foundations built up with shells, and there may be some role in, for some of them, for burial. There's been some metal objects, bronze objects found, and trading deeds, etc. And so, it'd be interesting to see, kind of highlight that movement of peoples, and the kind of day-to-day life, really, of those people that did live along the coast, that 6,000, 5,000 years ago. I think would be really interesting, and just fill out kind of the genomic side of it, if there is the availability of burial sites, and trying to understand all of the aspects around being able to get that done. There's kind of like all of these political forces, I guess, around this. Now, I have really no understanding about those aspects. But again, there's people that have been working in this field for some time, and there seems to be, like, I guess what I'd like to do is get best practices for international archaeology, and the pursuing that best practice archaeology, full stop, but then especially as relates to ancient DNA, to really start to understand the ancient populations that were here. And I think what will unfold is a better understanding of the complexity and time scales of population here, even to the extent of, and I would argue that there's some kind of really tightly held beliefs about when and where the domesticated horse, for example, when they existed. And if you look back at just the evidence and the kind of asymptotic tale of when equus species existed, you'll find that there was a 10 millennia overlap before the extinction event of horses here, and kind of the movements. So, I'd be really surprised if the archaeological record doesn't potentially indicate some kind of closer association with domesticated animals, in a way that would kind of upend a little bit the common understanding, or the kind of common kind of thought that horses were strictly introduced in by the Spanish or the Portuguese in the 1550 or whatever date it was, and then the expansion there. And there's no doubt that happened, but that there was no closer interaction between horses in at least isolated instances. I think may not hold water, and even to the extent where within the archaeological evidence, within ancient DNA, to be able to pull out examples of that, I think would be really interesting. So in ancient civilizations, in some of the burial rites, there were other animals buried within the same complex as, let's say, the leader of that area, and I think the same, it'd be interesting to investigate whether or not that that happened here in the Southeast as well, and then be able to really have a better understanding of if that did take place or not. We, for whatever reason, have not a very complex take on the populations that were here, and just let the science play out, as if using the best practices now can can help tell that story in a more kind of unbiased and fair way. I think it would be really useful for a lot of reasons, and it's just and I mean, it's kind of a cautionary, broader tale of civilizations rising and falling, and the seeming importance of needing to erase the histories of those that were conquered. And I don't think it should be seen as when you really understand history, there has been this has been the staple of human history, but I think we can do service to the populations that are no longer here and the civilizations that are no longer here, by at least for them rebuilding their history in a proper way, if that makes sense. And I think there's a lot of great science that can help contribute to that, to tell that broader story more as it happened and not as told by the victors. And I've got a book by John Jones, I believe it is, on Balliol, 1263 to 1939. And it tells the history of Balliol College. And I think it's interesting because of the influence of Benjamin Jowett, who was master during some of those most heady times of the British Empire. There is an intertwining of histories, for better, for worse. And I don't think we should look away from that and really tell that fuller story and really go into it instead of kind of recoiling in some kind of shock horror or feigned shock horror. I think retelling that story and retelling how the good and bad of it, nothing is good and bad in itself, but thinking makes it so. I think, and I think there is some interesting things. There was an interview that I just watched this morning about this young Australian. I think he's 24 at the time, Tom Robinson, I think his name is, and he through kind of through kind of his own wherewithal and using older practices, pre-computer practices, built his own, basically it was almost like a whaler rowboat, and crossed from Peru through the all the way to French Polynesia and slightly beyond past American Samoa, and then was capsized. He was unable to right the boat, and was subsequently rescued by a cruise ship. But what was fascinating there was he spent, I believe, 4 months on one of these islands, and spent time with the people there, and they have cultures now that absolutely celebrate their heritage, and are the most happy and loving people. I mean, it's still a hard life. They have to fish, they have to subside, but Christianity actually plays an incredibly important role in their society. They kept their traditional dances, they kept everything else, but they go to church 5 days a week, and they have this incredible melding of their traditional beliefs and Christian beliefs. So they're not in some way changed. They're just that is now part of their culture for hundreds of years, and so, and they're incredibly happy, and they're incredibly grateful for for interactions with the outside world. So there's a story there that's not kind of told, and there are many other examples, and in fact, even within Latin America and South America, there are still, I don't want to say like pre-contact people, but people that still speak their native language that bristle at contact from the outside world, or at least defend their own land, I think fairly so, from outsiders. There was a interesting subject about somebody cycling through Mexico down to towards Panama, and talking to the locals is really important, because certain roads are impassable because of locals there that will still defend those tracks, those dirt tracks leading over their property. There's that still kind of wild kind of aspect, and I think that Tom Robinson individual in the ancient Polynesian language was, I believe, I don't know which language was spoken, but was given a name, from his journey, the one that traveled far across the ocean. So, and so anyway, that was interesting. But getting back to this whole discussion and this idea of the kind of additional study of these, especially things on the seashore, on the sea line, because there has been an expansive history over thousands of years of travel along coasts, both from the north and the south, and across various straits. And the picture that's being painted now with archaeological evidence is still being built out, but indicates many different events that occurred people to travel from island to island, not only in the Pacific, but also obviously in the Caribbean Sea as well. And the types of crafts, and the speed at which they could travel indicate that this was a lot more extensive than previously thought, and the speed at which the travel could occur is likely faster than what is previously thought. And then a couple of other things published in the literature, in these nature level papers, is the Antikythera mechanism, probably from 200 BC, 300 BC. It's an incredibly detailed understanding of the celestial sky encoded in a metal and wood box with pretty phenomenal metal working, bronze working, that indicates that the understanding could be formalized into a mechanical device even back then, 2,300 years ago. That kind of challenges some of the models, and that's why it's published in such a great journal. And we can really glean a lot from that. And then there's a wreck off of Turkey. I think it's like the Uleth something. I forget the exact name of it, but that was even earlier. I think that was maybe 1700 BC, so 3,700 years ago. And there's published work there as well, incredible published work, indicating the extent of trade. And I think what surprised me too was just the nearly 4,000 years ago, the extent of the governance and the ability to communicate across different cultures, and the ability to have debt contracts likely and all these other things to allow for this kind of trade across Asia and Europe and North Africa. It's pretty stunning. And so all these things kind of again fit into this model of really kind of embracing the complexities of cultures and language and conflict, you know. And then from my other studies, really understanding how, you know, these movements could likely potentiate pandemics and other infectious disease incidences that can play out, just like COVID in 2020 played out in our world, how these things can actually affect populations and affect you know, the rise and fall of civilization. So I think there are these kind of different levers that you can pull to really understand how these things happen. And certainly for the native populations here, the ancestral populations, I'll say, within North America and South America, infectious disease, as we know, played a very important role, unintentionally, and unfortunately sometimes what appears to be intentional aspects of that. You know, I want to see like how I can potentially kind of contribute to that. So I've published with some of the leaders in the field before, and kind of setting up you know, kind of the best practices here, and really trying to build out our thought leadership here in the Southeast. I think would be really cool. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.